Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to really get under the skin of big ideas so you leave, well, properly informed and maybe ready to impress your friends a little.
Yeah.
Today, we are diving deep into Simone de Beauvoir's The Ethics of Ambiguity. It's pretty profound stuff.
Absolutely. It's challenging, definitely. She really pushes us to rethink, freedom, responsibility, how we deal with a world that just feels contradictory,
Yeah.
ambiguous.
Yeah, ambiguous is the word. And our mission, like always, is to pull out the absolute core ideas, those nuggets of knowledge, so you can really get a handle on it without, getting totally bogged down.
And the big question Beauvoir tackles is this.
Yeah.
How do we actually find real meaning? How do we act effectively? And her answer isn't about escaping the paradoxes of life.
No.
It's about embracing them, living in that tension.
That makes me think straight away of that Montaigne quote she uses. The continuous work of our life is to build death.
Wow. It's stark, isn't it?
Mhm.
But it really sets the scene for what she means by assuming our fundamental ambiguity.
Okay, let's unpack that then. Assume our fundamental ambiguity. What does that actually mean?
Well, at its heart, it means we have to accept that we humans are just paradoxical. Think about it, right? We feel totally free inside our own heads, like sovereign subjects choosing our path.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, we're physical beings. We're limited by our bodies, by our situation, by, well, the world. Where the thinking Reed Montaigne talked about, we know we're fragile.
So that's the tragic ambivalence. We're aware of this split, unlike, say, a plant.
Exactly. We know it. We feel ourselves as this pure internal mind, untouchable almost.
Yeah, like nothing outside matters.
But then reality hits. We feel crushed by external forces, treated like objects. We're these sovereign rulers in our minds, but just tiny individuals in a huge dependent group.
And even the present moment, it can feel like nothing, caught between a past that's gone and a future that isn't here yet.
A void, yeah. It's a profound feeling.
And Beauvoir says for ages, philosophers actually tried to sort of, sweep this under the rug, hide the ambiguity.
Pretty much. They tried to tidy it up,
Yeah.
reduce mind to matter or matter to mind, deny death, deny life, try to merge them somehow, make the tension go away.
Even Hegel.
Well, Hegel was more ingenious, definitely. He tried to reconcile it all, find fertile restlessness, even in, bloody wars. But it still kind of leans towards optimism, a final, neat resolution.
But Beauvoir's argument is that now we feel this paradox way more intensely. We see ourselves as the ultimate point, the supreme end.
Right. Humanity should be the goal.
But then, in practice, we end up treating each other like tools or just obstacles in the way.
Think about the atomic bomb example she uses. We create this immense power.
Only to destroy ourselves.
Yeah. Or just that feeling of being totally unique, experiencing your life, but feeling utterly insignificant in the face of huge crowds, huge systems. She mentions Stalingrad, Buchenwald.
Horrors and heroism side by side.
Exactly. And she says, neither of the two wipes out the other. They both exist, that grandeur, that horror, simultaneously.
Okay, so if we can't escape it, if we feel it so strongly, what do?
We assume it. We accept it. This irreducible, paradoxical nature of being human. And that's where existentialism really comes into play.
Right, from Kierkegaard pushing back against Hegel to Sartre.
Sartre defining man as that being whose being is not to be. Existentialism embraces the ambiguity. It's often misunderstood, seen as just doom and gloom, absurdity and despair.
But Beauvoir pushes back on that.
Hard.
Mm-hmm.
She says, look, without failure, no ethics. The whole idea of ethics, of having to be something, only makes sense if you question your own existence. You don't need ethics for a god. A god just is.
And that Sartre phrase, useless passion, it's actually ambiguous itself, isn't it? It's not forced on us, we choose it.
Exactly. And it's only useless if you imagine some value outside of human passion, some external benchmark.
Okay.
For Beauvoir, our real passion is wanting to disclose being, wanting to bring meaning into the world just by being here, by making choices. And that, she argues, is actually a success, not a failure.
How so?
By stepping back, by seeing the world not just as a given thing, but something we interact with, we actually become truly present to it. She calls it a conversion.
The conversion.
Yeah, like accepting we can't be God, we can't be this absolute fixed thing, and instead affirming our existence as human with all the tension. It's like a negation of the negation. We're constantly reaffirming our freedom by not being fixed. We remain this dynamic negativity almost within our positive existence.
And the consequence of that is huge. The genuine man, she says, won't accept any foreign absolute, No God setting the rules, no fixed, unconditioned values.
Right. Because for Beauvoir, value is this lacking being of which freedom makes itself a lack.
Whoa, okay, break that down.
Basically, values aren't just out there, we create them. Our desires, our choices, our freedom make things valuable. Our existence makes values pop up.
So the truth is just, man exists, full stop.
Pretty much. Outside of existence, there is nobody. So asking if life is useful or worth living kind of misses the point. The real question is, do you want to live? And under what conditions you find meaningful?
Okay, that feels incredibly freeing, but doesn't that lead straight back to that old problem? If we're totally free, does that mean, like Dostoevsky worried, everything is permitted? Chaos?
But Beauvoir flips that right around. She says, precisely because there's no God, no external safety net, our actions are definitive, absolute engagements. Meaning we bear the full weight. The world isn't made by some external power. It's made by us, by our choices. Our mistakes are inexpiable. You can't just get divine forgiveness. If you dismiss earthly life as unimportant, you're appealing to that cold, inhuman objectivity she rejects. It's totally up to man to make it important to be a man.
But what about that criticism that this is all just subjective, solipsistic, like you're stuck in your own head? How do you connect with anyone?
She says that's dishonest. The very act of thinking, the I think, therefore I am, is universal. Everyone can access it. And by placing value in human freedom, she's actually building on people like Kant, Hegel. The idea that the world is fundamentally willed by man, not alien to us.
And connecting that outwards. Beauvoir's existentialism isn't about some abstract universal man, right? It's about real, concrete people, plural.
Exactly. The plurality of concrete, particular men.
Which then begs the question, if we start separate, how do we come together? How do we build shared rules or understanding?
Her Ethics of Ambiguity accepts that separation, but believes our individual freedoms can forge laws that work for everyone, which leads her to contrast this with Marxism.
Okay, Marxism also rejects that inhuman objectivity, right? And it's got roots in Kant and Hegel, too.
Yeah, there's common ground. Marxists argue needs, class struggle, they define the goals. They reject utopian socialism. For them, our wills are kind of a reflection of objective conditions.
Well, Beauvoir sees a key difference there.
A huge one. For her, meaning surges up only by the disclosure which a free subject affects in his project. A Marxist still has to decide internally to join the party. That choice comes from them. Even the proletariat, she argues, isn't just a historical force. Individuals have the freedom to betray or be swayed, like in Germany or America. Deny that, and you're talking about an abstract idea of the proletariat, not real people.
And she points out this contradiction, doesn't she? How Marxists, in practice, use moral language, condemning cowardice, selfishness.
Right. Their moralizing speeches imply belief in freedom. You wouldn't get indignant about something purely mechanical. You have to believe people can choose differently to praise or blame them. You don't blame a rock for falling, you know?
Which brings us to that really interesting challenge she discusses. Marxists sometimes say a philosophy based on freedom makes collective action impossible. They flip Kant's idea, saying, you must, therefore you cannot. What's that about?
It's a core disagreement. The Marxist argument she critiques is that without external constraints, we just follow whims, right? So freedom actually prevents justification. But Beauvoir insists that believing in freedom doesn't lead to despair. It actually reveals a principle of action whose range will be universal. It gives us a foundation to act.
And she distinguishes between our will to be, like wanting to be absolute, like God, which fails, and our will to be a disclosure of being, which succeeds because we bring meaning to the world. And that involves this constant tension, pulling away from the world to assert ourselves as free.
Exactly. Freedom is the source of all meaning, all values. To make life meaningful, you must want freedom itself, absolutely, and above everything else. It's not a thing you get, it's something you do, something conquered.
And choosing not to be free. Laziness, cowardice, those are just ways of running away from the anxiety freedom causes.
That's how she sees it, flights from anguish. And freedom isn't static, right? It grows through patience, courage, and fidelity. A project doesn't get validated from outside. It founds itself.
But there are limits. The world pushes back. Descartes said our freedom is infinite, but our power is limited.
Definitely. And Beauvoir tackles that. Just banging your head against a wall is stupid stubbornness. It wastes your freedom. But just giving up, like the Stoics suggesting you renounce projects if they get hard, that leaves freedom emptied of all content, abstract and useless.
So real freedom means staying engaged, even when things fail. Like her Van Gogh example. He accepted he might not paint, But his art was a way of life, communication that could find another form.
Exactly that. It's not bleak resignation. It's lived in both heartbreak and joy. Heartbreak at losing that project. Joy that your hands are now free for something new. Freedom needs to open possibilities, disclose being, not get stuck.
But what about those situations where you're totally blocked? Oppression, like digging a ditch and filling it again forever, or life imprisonment, when you just can't project yourself forward.
Yeah, that's when transcendence is cut off. Spontaneity dies. It leads to this wretched disgust, she says, which is more intolerable than fatigue.
So what's the response then?
Revolt, rejecting that human oppression. But if the future is completely radically blocked off, then revolt might only be possible through the ultimate rejection. Suicide. She argues freedom can always save itself, though. It finds meaning even in failure and can affirm itself by a death freely chosen.
Okay, but hang on. If there's always a way to affirm existence, even in death, how is evil willing even possible? Why isn't everyone just good by default?
This is key, and where she really differs from someone like Kant. Kant saw man as positive. Beauvoir sees man as negativity, as being at a distance from himself.
Meaning?
Think of it like light and dark. For light to be meaningful, darkness has to exist. For us to genuinely choose freedom, choose the good, the possibility of not choosing it, of choosing evil, has to be there. We're not just purely positive beings like a God who simply is. Our defining trait is that ability to step back, to say, no, that's our negativity.
So the possibility of choosing badly is what makes choosing well meaningful.
Precisely. It is precisely because an evil will is here possible that the words, to will oneself free, have a meaning. This gives a real role to evil, without real danger, real failure, real earthly damnation. Words like victory, wisdom, joy, they're empty. Dishonesty, bad willing, is stopping, running away, falsely claiming you're something you're not, all driven by that fear, that anguish of freedom.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So let's take that idea, the ambiguity, the possibility of bad faith, and see how it plays out as we grow up, as we engage with the world. Where does this journey start?
Well, Beauvoir goes back to Descartes. Man's unhappiness is due to his having first been a child. As kids, we're thrown into a world we didn't make. Values seem like ready-made things.
That's the spirit of seriousness she talks about, believing values are objective facts.
Exactly. And the child feels happily irresponsible, shielded from the anguish of freedom by this sort of ceiling built by previous generations. They play at being heroes or saints, believing it all.
But this childhood state can linger, right? Into adulthood.
Sadly, yes. Through servitude, ignorance. She mentions slaves who have not raised themselves to the consciousness of their slavery, or how Southern planters saw Black people as grown-up children. She even applies it to women in many societies, including Western women of today, who might take shelter in the shadow of men, accepting values without question. Their seeming lightness masks a deep complicity.
But she makes a crucial distinction there, doesn't she, between the child situation and the adults?
Absolutely critical. The child situation is imposed, it's natural, it's temporary, but for the adult woman she's describing, she chooses it, or at least consents to it. When liberation is possible, then choosing to resign your freedom becomes dishonesty, a positive fault.
And adolescence is the breaking point, when the serious world starts to crumble.
Yeah, that's when the contradictions show up. Adults stop looking like gods. The teenager is suddenly abandoned, unjustified, the prey of a freedom that is no longer chained up by anything. That's the moment of moral choice.
And the misfortune of childhood was that freedom was hidden, leading to this lifelong nostalgia for not knowing its demands.
Exactly, that longing for irresponsibility.
This sets up her analysis of different ways people fail to embrace freedom, these types of unfreedom. It's a really fascinating breakdown.
It is. She starts with the subman.
Okay, the subman.
This is someone just lacking living warmth, marked by apathy, a deep fear in the face of existence. They reject the whole passion of being human. Their actions are just flights, attempts to escape, reducing their potential to nothingness. They're like a brute fact, just there.
So if they're just a thing, why does Beauvoir care? What's the issue?
Because, she argues, even as we see them as just a fact, we also recognize they are responsible. We hold them in contempt precisely because we see they could choose, but they don't. They hide in the ready-made values of the serious world. And crucially, they become dangerous. A blind, uncontrolled force, easily swept up in mobs, lynchings, and pogroms because they abdicate their own judgment.
Okay, and from the subman, we move logically to the serious man.
Exactly. The serious man actually commits to those ready-made values the subman just hides behind. They submerge their freedom in the content which the latter accepts from society. They try to get rid of his freedom by claiming to subordinate it to values which would be unconditioned, a cause, science revolution, whatever.
And this is dishonesty because they're pretending these values aren't their choice. They're hiding the act of giving value themselves.
Precisely, they mask the subjective source.
And what's really striking is how dangerous she sees this being. If you ignore your own subjectivity, you ignore others too. You sacrifice people to the thing, like that colonial administrator building the highway.
Yeah, believing the highway is an absolute good that justifies trampling lives. It leads to fanaticism, the Inquisition, vigilantes. Their whole life collapses if their cause fails. They live in constant preoccupation of worry. The problem is denying their own freedom and therefore others.
Then comes the nihilist.
The nihilist is basically disappointed seriousness. The cause failed, the idol crumbled, so they turn it all inwards. They decide to be nothing, trying to make annihilation itself a positive goal. They reject being human, leading to hatred of all men along with himself. She mentions Drew La Rochelle as an example.
So the nihilist is right that the world lacks external justification. But where's the mistake for Beauvoir?
He forgets that it is up to him to justify the world and to make himself exist validly. His rejection doesn't just stop there. It turns into a positive desire for destruction, creating a tyranny that freedom then has to fight. His problem is total rejection of the world and himself.
Okay, next up, the adventurer. This one sounds a bit more positive, maybe?
Initially, yeah, the adventurer takes delight in living, doesn't seem to need external justification, engages in action for its own sake, exploring, conquering, fighting. He likes action for its own sake. Seems free, right?
Yeah, so it sounds almost like the existential ideal. But you're saying Beauvoir sees a flaw here, too.
A critical one. Often the adventurer is secretly serious about a goal, fame, fortune. Or, more importantly, he becomes indifferent to the content. That is, to the human meaning of his action. He ends up sharing the nihilist's contempt for men, using them as tools. Think conquistadors, Don Juan. It leads back to tyranny because he forgets that no man can save himself alone. He tries to achieve his freedom against others, which ultimately fails.
Right. And lastly, the passionate man. How does he differ?
He's sort of the antithesis of the adventurer. The passionate man sets up an object, a person, art, an idea as an absolute. But he knows this value comes from his subjectivity, his passion. He genuinely loves the thing itself.
Okay, so passion is good, right? What's the potential problem there?
The problem is the desire for possession. He wants to attain being, to merge completely with the object of his passion. But that's impossible. He always remains at a distance. He is never fulfilled. This can breed solitude, tyranny, fanaticism, as he uses others to serve his obsession.
But is there a way out for the passionate man?
Yes, she suggests a conversion within passion. Accepting the distance, renouncing total possession, like Mademoiselle de Lespinasse loving her unhappiness itself. Love becomes renunciation of all possession. But this generosity, this passion, must be directed towards things that open possibilities for other people too, not just lock the passionate person away. The danger is self-serving obsession.
Okay, so across all these types, subman, serious man, nihilist, adventurer, passionate man, what Beauvoir's showing is that real freedom isn't about escape or fixed answers. It's about how we face ambiguity, how we choose to affirm existence and open possibilities, crucially for others too.
Exactly, which brings us back to that point. Every man has to do with other men. The world isn't neutral. It's soaked in human meanings. It's a speaking world. It offers concrete content for our freedom.
But if the world is always speaking, always changing, can't we just sit back and enjoy the show? Like, appreciate it aesthetically, but not get our hands dirty?
The aesthetic attitude. Yes, she addresses that. It's like the historian watching empires rise and fall detached, or the tourist at the Colosseum, or those Italian intellectuals looking back at the past, or French intellectuals in 1940 trying to stay aloof from the fray.
And Beauvoir says that's a position of withdrawal, a way of fleeing the truth of the present. Why is that a problem?
Because the present is the moment of choice and action. We don't just contemplate. Man does. Even trying to stand outside is still a way of living the fact you're inside. You're still an actor in the drama. And that beautiful book about child labor, if it just makes you appreciate the prose and forget the suffering, it subtly justifies the horror. An artist, anyone, must first be situated in this world. A man among men. You can't truly detach.
So willing freedom means willing to disclose being, which means constructive action, science, art, philosophy, these are indefinite conquests of existence over being. Progress isn't reaching some endpoint, but constantly pursuing the expansion of his existence.
Right. And genuine technology opens possibilities, not just aims to save time or create some static happiness. It's about fulfilling life's movement. But then there's the flip side, negative action, often born from oppression. That's when our ability to project meaning is condemned to fall uselessly back upon itself because it is cut off from its goals.
And her point that man is never oppressed by things,
Yeah.
only against other men, that's huge. It puts all the focus on human relationships, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The resistance of nature, of objects, supports our action. Oppression is different. It divides the world, those who create meaning, and those forced into repetitive dead-end tasks to support them. The only way out for the oppressed is revolt.
And conservatives might call oppression natural, but revolutionaries see it as a human fact to be rejected. Which brings up Hegel and Marx again and the idea of the proletariat needing to end itself as a class.
Yeah, to abolish the very conditions that create oppression. And Beauvoir insists all men are interested in this elimination, even the oppressors, as Marx noted. This includes helping those who don't even realize they're oppressed, like Flora Tristan trying to raise class consciousness.
But that immediately leads to the question, who are you to want something for others? What gives you the right to intervene?
Beauvoir is unequivocal. The cause of freedom is not that of others more than it is mine. It is universally human. Doing nothing is complicity, and complicity is tyranny. She calls out the oppressor's trick. Oh, you're trying to free them, but you're oppressing me. Like the slaveholders versus the abolitionists.
Right.
Her point is sharp. We have to respect freedom only when it is intended for freedom, not when it strays, flees itself, and resigns itself. A freedom which is interested only in denying freedom must be denied. Other people's freedom is the very condition of your own. Preventing someone from imprisoning their neighbor isn't violating their freedom, it's upholding freedom itself.
And oppressors justify themselves either by appealing to past values, the conservative approach,
Like Salazar building castles instead of hospitals, preferring the thing to man.
or by claiming future utility, capitalism boosting production, colonialism exploiting resources.
But again, Beauvoir asks, useful to whom? Nothing is useful if it is not useful to man. Nothing is useful to man if the latter is not in a position to define his own ends and values, if he is not free. The supposed benefits only become real when people are free to use them their own way.
She admits it's tough, though. You probably can't respect all freedom simultaneously, so we have to accept the tension of the struggle.
Which leads directly into the antinomies of action, these unavoidable, painful contradictions when you act for liberation.
Because you can't just wait for oppressors to see the light. Action often means violence, treating them like things, which confirms the sad separation between people.
It's a bitter truth, she calls it. No action can be generated for man without its being immediately generated against men. Oppressors hide this by devaluing those they hurt.
And the individual can be reduced to just a fact, a thing. Like in Buchenwald, Dachau. Horror can become so overwhelming it seems to erase meaning.
But she insists even then the smile of an oppressed child is an appeal and a promise. It exposes the lie. Humans are about the future, about projects. Tyrants try to lock people into imminence, the static present.
And those collectivist ideas, Hegel, fascism, Marxism, that say the individual only matters when they're part of the group, subordinated.
Yeah, that easily leads to sacrifice. Young Nazis dying joyfully for an abstract idea.
So does individual life mean nothing then in those schemes? What's Beauvoir's stance?
Absolutely not. She insists only the subject can justify his own existence. No external subject can bring him salvation from the outside. Both nihilistic pessimism, life is meaningless, and rationalistic optimism, it'll all be fine, fail. Remember the invalid asking, if nothing have any importance, what good is it to get cured? She was right. Individual meaning matters.
Democratic societies try to get that back, the sacredness of the individual.
But the cost of sacrifice remains real. It's a wrench. It's not natural nor easy. Heroism is total renunciation. Collectivism often ignores love, friendship where individuals are irreplaceable. Violence is a crime for the person doing it. Saint-Just. No one governs innocently.
Even if violence is claimed to be necessary, like in historical materialism.
Beauvoir says that logic removes the anguish from decision-making. Leaders know they hesitate, they know the risks. Thought itself becomes dangerous for authoritarian regimes, like in Koestler's Darkness at Noon. They try to control minds to mask the violence.
And the justification of utility. The end justifies the means.
She questions what useful truly means. People and their lives can't be treated like blind instruments or merchandise. Man is both a means and an end. The real point of usefulness is man himself.
Which reveals the core contradiction, the antinomy.
Yeah.
Sacrifice is justified by utility, but utility means serving man. So in order to serve some men, we must do disservice to others. By what principle are we to choose?
It's agonizing. Numbers matter, saving 10 lives versus 1, maybe, but no multiplication is relevant to subjectivity. You can't quantify individual experience. The SS elections were the horrific extreme of that logic.
So justification always lies in the future. Man, insofar as he is, the future of man.
But future means two things. There's just more time, linear continuation, and then there's the future thing, glory, happiness, justice, that perfect state, the end of all problems.
And that future thing is what lets people justify terrible things now. The end justifies the means. It brings the tranquility of the serious.
Yeah, sacrificing people today seems okay if infinitely more people benefit in that perfect future.
So does Beauvoir think that perfect future, that future thing, is actually possible? Or is it a dangerous fantasy?
She says that dream is not permitted. Why? Because man is originally a negativity. We're always becoming, always choosing. Freedom will never be given. It will always have to be won. She quotes Trotsky, the future as a permanent revolution.
So if struggle is inherent, waiting for universal peace to live properly means waiting forever.
Pretty much. We have to find salvation within his own existence, affirming a finite future. Aiming for total knowledge or total power makes action meaningless. It's too vast. We act within finite forms. History isn't one neat story. It's detotalized totalities. We have to choose, help shape it, accept the uncertainty. The moral order is crucial.
And the danger of the end justifies the means is when the end is so far off, the means become the actual goal, like the triumph of Russia for Stalinists justifying anything now.
Right. It blocks the horizon, which underscores the importance of the present. Existence must be asserted in the present if one does not want all life to be defined as an escape toward nothingness. She even mentions festivals like the Liberation of Paris, moments of pure present affirmation, spending for nothing, asserting existence itself.
Man fulfills himself within the transitory or not at all. We have to will our projects absolutely now. Long-term goals need meaning in themselves, not just pointing to some mythical end of history.
Which brings us back to ambiguity versus absurdity. What's the difference and how does it guide action?
Okay, so absurdity means denying meaning is ever possible. Ambiguity means the meaning isn't fixed. It has to be constantly won. Ambiguity doesn't kill ethics. It demands ethics. But ethics doesn't give recipes, right? Just methods.
Exactly. No simple instruction manual. The method is about comparing the values you achieve versus the values you aim for, the actual meaning of your act versus its concrete content.
But how do we choose? When freedoms clash, when actions contradict goals.
Her starting point is the individual. The individual as such is one of the ends at which our action must aim. This echoes Christian charity, Epicurean friendship, Kantian morals. Reject all external authorities.
The core principle, to treat the other as a freedom so that his end may be freedom, which means you have to invent an original solution every time.
Yes. Like saving someone from suicide gives them back their choice, but constantly enabling a hopeless addict might not. Forcing treatment on an invalid is only justified if it leads to their greater freedom, their recovery. Responsibility makes you stricter. Love authorizes severities.
So don't help someone flee freedom, but also don't try to force virtue on them from outside, like inquisitors.
Right, and that applies politically too. You can't justify violence by claiming others are ignorant. Elites must respect the freedom of the child, the illiterate. She slams the excuse of denying suffrage because people are incompetent. The ignorant person still has interests. He alone is competent to decide upon his hopes. A child's situation is natural and temporary. Oppression is imposed.
Okay, but back to choosing among freedoms. When they conflict. Politics uses big ideas, nation, empire, but they only matter if they serve actual individuals. This gets really tough with causes that seem to serve humanity but involve brutality, like Stalinism.
Yeah, and how do we judge such complex actions without falling into logical traps, into fallacies?
She points out two traps: the opponent focusing only on the violence, ignoring the stated goals, and the defender blindly justifying any means by the end. She insists there's no total dialectic making outcomes inevitable. Every choice is finite, uncertain. It's an ethical choice, a wager, like the choices faced by Girondists in Saint-Just.
The means and ends are tangled. Sometimes it's clearer. Sacrifice one traitor to save 10 innocents. Sometimes violence isn't about immediate results, but creating a state of violence, like the resistance, or fostering solidarity and awareness, like in Steinbeck's In Dubious Battle.
And that Dos Passos example. Saving real minors now versus hypothetical future propaganda. Prioritizing concrete people over an abstract idea. The warning is clear. An action which wants to serve man ought to be careful not to forget him on the way. Vigilance.
Because the person of action can become a dictator, not because their goals are bad, but because the goals get imposed through their will. Will to power and generosity look similar at the start, but politics often takes the path of least resistance, laziness and brutality.
Which is why opposition is vital, to stop liberation turning into tyranny. That cycle, freedom to freedom through oppression, seems unavoidable, but tyranny can't be allowed to win. The fight for freedom must continue.
So is this ethic individualistic? Yes, she says, because it values the individual's power to create meaning. It's anti-totalitarian.
But crucially, not solipsistic, not self-absorbed. Because we're defined by our connection to the world, to others. Our freedom depends on theirs. We exist by reaching out.
And this doesn't mean anarchy. Man is free, but he finds his law in his very freedom. It's a constant struggle, never finished. We don't accept failure. We struggle against it without respite.
But isn't that just hopeless optimism, fighting a losing battle? She says no, that's judging by a false, inhuman standard. In the earthly domain, all glorification of the earth is true as soon as it is realized. When we value things, words, colors, laws, friendship, love, they have that value. Absolutely. We make it real.
It's an ethics with no evasion. It says, despite our limits, through our limits, we fulfill our existence as an absolute. Even with the huge world, our ignorance, future risks, our weakness. The fact remains that we are absolutely free today if we choose to will our existence in its finiteness, a finiteness which is open on the infinite.
Wow, that's quite something. So that old saying, do what you must, come what may. It's not about blindness, is it? It's about affirming that our meaning comes from our own drive, lived right here in the messy, ambiguous present. The choosing, the acting is the salvation, not some far-off paradise here and now.